Some people live on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil. Others, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel. You may know me from the cases I've covered as a lifelong crime reporter and the stories I've told about law enforcement and crime across Mississippi. Along with my co-hosts, Nicole Crowell and Amanda Johansson, we've seen both the best and the worst of human nature. We believe there's no greater responsibility than telling the stories of the men and women who pursue the truth, who hunt the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who piece together some of the most significant investigations of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide.
Hey everybody, welcome to Investigation Homicide. I am Therese Apel. We want to thank our sponsors first, right off the bat. We've got Southern Connection and ADSI, and we'll be bringing you a little word from them later on today. I've got Amanda Johansson with me today. Amanda, this one's a little different.
Yeah, threw us for a loop whenever we found out that our scheduled guest was sick.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're going to work through it, and it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, so what we decided to do is you guys, the listeners, the viewers, you guys are going to be our guest today, if you want to be. Now, I mean, this may just end up being us talking to ourselves, but even so, we've got a list of just, the episodes that you guys have liked the most. We want to talk about some of the things maybe you guys would want to see. So this is just going to be a fun talk about what it's like to do this podcast, kind of some of the things that have spurred us on, some of the things that have been interesting to us, and some of the episodes that you guys have really liked the most. So I'm kind of looking to see how we're picking up because we've got to wait for you guys to get online, obviously. But we're glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. And Daniel, are we able to hear from our sponsors yet? Okay, we're about to do that.
I am currently owner CEO of ADSI. I've got a whole bunch of guys that are a whole lot smarter than I am. And what they do is they develop software for police departments and dispatchers, and that's what we do. And our why is Deputy William Durr. And William Durr gave his life to protect others. And so what we try to do is make sure that if I can provide some level of officer safety, that's all that matters to us.
While on the force, I learned that an officer is only as good as his team and the gear that he carries. Ultimately, that is what helped me make the decision to supply and support the demands that the officers need.
From uniforms to upfitting service vehicles, our family strives to connect people with the resources they need. From enforcing the law, fighting fires, or simply protecting the ones they love. At the Southern Connection Police Supplies, our family is here for yours. Stop by and see for yourself.
Okay, so we're back. And Amanda, let's start off by talking about, so the way this podcast started, you weren't here for the beginning of it, but you did come in as a guest when we, first brought you in. So it started with Nicole Crowell and I. She helped me start Dark Horse Press. And we wanted to tell some stories of both some of the cases that we had been a part of and covered, but also some of the cases that you guys, the listeners, talk about the most. Amanda, you came on to talk about, was it human trafficking?
I'll be honest, I don't really remember. Probably, I feel like I talked about trafficking and child crimes and negotiations and kind of all the things that I
That you
kind of do as an investigator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was super fun, and that was kind of when you announced that I would be joining the team.
Right?
And that was a trial by fire situation, and it was super fun. I was fresh off of the pageant circuit, so I was kind of used to talking to people. But this is a very different, very, very different type of conversation.
It's almost like it could kind of be considered a mix between what you do pageant-wise and as an investigator. Because you're asking questions, but you're friendly this time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I try and be friendly as a cop too, but yeah, it is. There's a camera looking at you recording, so you want to make sure, like, fix your face. But yeah, it is definitely a time where I can like pull from the things I've learned in the pageant world and pull from my knowledge of what I do every day.
Sure. Well, and one thing that I have loved is that we have viewers and listeners that are, with us every week. And then I can go places and they'll ask about certain episodes. They'll ask who we've got coming up next, that kind of thing. And recently we had a case that you helped find the guest from one of the classes that you were in.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about what it's like to be. I mean, for me, it's like I'm a journalist. My job is to go find people to interview. But for you, it's kind of like you happen to run into somebody that had a great story.
Yeah. Honestly, in law enforcement, like I kind of like seclude myself. And I don't really talk to a lot of people. So it just happened. I think we were on a break from class, and I don't even know how it came up, but I mentioned the podcast, and people started looking it up. Or you know what? Actually, I have to thank iPhones and AI and Siri's listening and whatever, because one of the guys ended up my profile or the investigation homicide thing popped up on his phone, and that's how the
Amazing.
conversation started. And then the guy sitting behind me was like, "Oh man, I have a great story for you that you should have on the podcast." And all of a sudden it dawned on me that oh, I'm in a room full of cops. I should probably be that should be my fun fact.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Hey, I'm on a podcast, so if you have anything you want to talk about, hit me up during the bathroom break."
And that's how we got Gary Stanton.
Yes.
We just had a great episode with him about the
Yes.
Therese Wilson case.
And he
Williams?
did
Therese.
yeah. I know that he lived in Arkansas. He did not live in
Right.
Tennessee. Yes, and Gary did such a good job of the way that he laid out the case. When we were talking afterwards, I said that I kind of compared the way he presented it to the way Greg Jones laid out his case. It was very suspenseful, and they lead the listeners on the investigation. They don't just give you all the information up front. And so I think that's kind of those types of guests are my favorite, because you feel like you're in the investigation and you actually are sitting here wondering, oh, what happens next, as opposed to, oh, okay, you identified the suspect and now you're going to tell us how you identified them.
Right.
Kind of like reading the end of a book
Yeah.
before you read the whole thing.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting about this, and that I want our readers and listeners, our viewers and listeners to know, is that in some of these cases, we are very much aware of what the case is, but we are not aware of all the twists and turns that it takes. When I started this podcast, my thing was there's a million podcasts out there where you can get people sitting there and they're telling you their idea of what happened. And I think when you're in the roles that you and I are in, Amanda, it's kind of a situation where people are calling you, and I'll use the Jessica Chambers case, for example. There are still 250 million questions about that case, and everyone has an idea, and they want to call and say it was her brother, and her brother had passed away, so no, it wasn't. But you've got people that have their ideas from things they saw on social media, or maybe they've read some articles or whatever like that, but they don't know the innards of the case.
Right.
And so what I wanted was the people that know all the deep, dark pieces. And if they can tell us, great. And we've had a couple of cases where they couldn't tell us yet. And one of those was, and I'm going to go ahead and I pulled up all the most popular episodes we've had. And we had 2 episodes on the Chandra May case, which is a 40-year-old cold case. And both of those are in our top 10 all time. I also pulled a top 10 Amanda list because, we've got 3 other co-hosts. It's
Right.
you. Nicole is out on maternity leave, and we don't know if she's coming back or not because you have a baby, and then you got a baby.
Right.
Right? And then we got Sarah, who also has a baby, but her baby's older.
Correct.
So, so the most popular one that you and I have hosted together, I see that we're getting a couple of comments here. Hello, everyone. So the one that we did that was the most popular, can you guess?
I really can't. I think probably because we just do so many,
Yeah.
and I'm already bad at remembering names, let alone the names of the suspects, the victims, the people we talk to.
Right.
So, drum roll.
So it is The Last Shift, 1996 Jackson Firehouse Massacre with Charlie Smith.
Oh,
And that was a good one.
yes. I I love the episodes where people really just show their vulnerability. I don't even think it's like the details of that case. I think it is just how genuine Charlie is.
Mhm.
And he shows you that, like, this job is hard.
Yeah.
Not just hard, like, physically, but emotionally and mentally. And so I love the episodes where people come here and they are just so honest, and you just feel it with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was the thing that struck me about that one too, is that Charlie, of course, everybody knows Charlie if they listen to the podcast, but he's
right.
also got this whole entire legacy of guys that learned from him. And so when we see him, tell his stories and be human, it reminds me that, like, this guy is responsible for training a lot of the investigators that are at agencies all across the state right now. And that makes me feel like we're in good hands,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have a question. Is there a case you've wanted to cover but haven't been able to because witnesses wouldn't talk or evidence wasn't available? I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. I know that for me, I work a fair amount of child cases that are, they've been through trial or sentencing or whatever, but I don't feel that those are cases that, like, I need to talk about because it's not my story. Um, and I can't imagine sharing someone's most vulnerable moment without them knowing about it. And of course, most of them are children, so I can't I can't just go around telling their story. Yeah, so I would love to be able to share some of that stuff, but that's just part of the job where it's not my story to tell.
Well, and I think that does touch on something that we have run into, is that, some of these stories, the big crime stories, they're out there. They've been in the newspaper, the public record is out there, they've been podcasted, they've been on TV, they've done all the things. And in those, we can talk about them. We can have those investigators on because those stories are out there. They've been told, or some of them are out there in different ways. It's definitely a case that's been tried and absolved. In the case you're talking about, when you've got especially a special victim,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a child, you've got an assault, a sexual assault, something like that. No, you can't just go throw that out there.
No.
So that makes it hard when you've got something that is that personal, that specific to, because also nobody wants to relive anything like that. And a lot of these stories are not things people want to relive. I had somebody accuse me once of saying that I was using other people's sad stories for entertainment. I feel like what we do here is much different than that, though.
Right. You have such a heart for, like, telling someone's story. You're not telling a story. You're telling someone's story. Like, it's a real person, and you want to show the world that, this person and all they overcame, how the system was able to succeed and get justice. Like, there's so many facets. And so shame on that person for saying that. But yeah, I don't think that we get any type of pleasure out of telling people's stories. I remember a couple years ago, I sat through sentencing on a case that I had been working on. And I remember being so excited. Like, I could not get out of the door fast enough. And I text you and I was like, she's going to get the first, the drop on this scoop.
Yep.
And then after I told you, I was like, wow, I'm so excited, but also, like, I can't celebrate. I can't go on the podcast and talk about this. I worked really hard, but that's done, and it's not my story to tell. And in that, there's a lot of grief in not getting to be excited about something that you worked really hard for.
See, and I think that's where the objectivity of your job and my job is hard, because I know as a journalist, like, it's a rare case that I get to say that is an evil person. And we can do that a little bit in here because the cases are absolved. There is a verdict, so it's not just alleged anymore. Now a jury has said you are guilty. So we have a little more leeway, but when you're talking about a case, it's like first you start with, well, we've still got some, innocent until proven guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is too, I think, and this kind of goes to one of the questions, how do you process seeing some of these terrible scenes and evidence? And we'll get to that in a minute. But I think one of the things that you and I have both seen in our line of work is that even the criminals are people.
Yes, and that was something that in my excitement about the success of the sentencing, like that person has family. Like they are now experiencing something. And the last thing I want to do is cause any type of grief or struggle for them. Like there's embarrassment, they're losing someone that they love. I mean, that's not my fault. I didn't make a decision that resulted in them going to prison, but you do have to remember that there are victims on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
And that is definitely hard when you just want to be like, ha ha ha, look at what the system finally got it right this time.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, and I think I've said that in several Facebook Lives after a verdict or in a homicide where they've got an arrest or things like that. I've said, the criminal's family, the alleged criminal or the convict's family, they didn't ask for this either.
No.
So that makes it a little more challenging for us because on the one hand, there's the very human, urge to celebrate that in this moment we feel like the good guys won. But then you have to stop and realize there's so many gray areas.
Yeah.
So another comment we have, which guest has changed your perspective on crime or investigations the most? And I realize you already have a perspective on investigations of crimes. But which guest do you feel like really kind of got in your head a little bit?
I don't know that there's any particular guest. I do. We all love Charlie, but I really do love seeing the, he is one of like the OGs that I'm used to seeing those guys who are kind of bare minimum burnout but he is still just as passionate today as he was probably when he started, and he doesn't want the bare minimum. He has a very high standard, and it's really refreshing to see that, and I wish we would see that more in like the new officers.
He still has such a passion for the work that he's done.
Yeah.
And a real pride in it. I think to me that makes him kind of stand out a lot. And I'm grateful that we found him.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you out, French. So I called Joseph French when he became the Brandon police chief. And I was like, you want to come talk about a case you've worked? And he was mostly interdiction for a good part of his career. And I was like, maybe you got a good bust one time or, something. He's like, I don't really think I'm the guy because he's understated. And he said, but I do know a guy that you might want to call. And I was like, okay, who? And he tells me, I was like, okay. And, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So in that moment, of course, I pick up the phone and I call Charlie Smith. And as soon as I start talking to him, I'm like, that's our guy. That's him right there. So Charlie, we love you. Zach, I know you watch a lot. We love you too. That's his son. So we have another question. Kevin Witzel. Kevin also has a podcast for first responders. If you don't listen to it, it's called The Silent War Within. It's about first responder mental health. So
that's right up my alley.
Yeah, I was going to say it's something you want to look into. So Kevin is asking, how do you process seeing all of these terrible scenes and evidence? For you, obviously, I mean, you kind of run the gamut. You get you're just major crimes. So you get all the major scenes, whether it's a homicide, whether it's a sexual assault, whether it's a major burglary, robbery, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do you process that?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not even sure it like registers to me. I think maybe one day, years from now, stuff will kind of like creep back in. I do have a couple of cases where a certain piece of evidence or some video or something kind of flashes, but most of the time, like, I just go to work.
Yeah.
And like, I'm just doing my job. It's kind of like, well, I won't use that example, but It's, like a doctor, like, look, they're looking at the thing that they're looking at. They're not paying attention to if you, like, shaved your legs or did your hair or what, like, they're just doing their job.
Right.
And I think that's kind of how I look at it. I'm just
Has
their
it
job.
changed the way you look at other people, though? I already know the answer to this one.
Other people. Bless their hearts. Yeah, just the people are so unaware. That's all I have to say about that. They're just so unaware of what happens in the
Right.
world.
And I think you're saying that is a lot like when I say, okay, so there's what the news tells you, and that
Mhm.
is about this much
Yeah.
of what's
Mhm.
actually going on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how you guys, feel about it as well.
Yeah.
And so we have another question. What's one question you've always wanted to ask a convicted killer but have never had the opportunity? You've gotten to ask a lot of your questions, but is there anything left undone?
Not that I can think of. Gosh, I love being in the interview room. That's I enjoy it. I
Yeah.
try and just have a conversation. I my interviews always somehow end up with like, who hurt you?
I can see that.
And we end up talking about, childhood trauma and whatever. I don't know that there's any questions. I think I like to leave uh, a conversation or an interview or whatever with the person on the other end feeling like they were heard, whether it's a victim telling me their story or it's a suspect who is giving me their confession that allows almost like an apology. Like, if you could, write an apology letter to this person, like, what would you say? And in that, they feel a little bit of like relief from the shame and the guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be something that drives a lot of, like, when you're able to get a confession. I have a firm belief that a lot of people that do these things we talk about didn't see themselves doing it, and once it's done, they don't know why they did it exactly. I mean, they may be able to say, "Well, I was angry or I was jealous or whatever like
Yeah.
that," but what causes you to cross that line,
Mm-hmm.
And for you, that's gotta be something you see a lot.
Oh, all the time. I think that there's always some backstory, some history of abuse, whether mentally, emotionally, physically. Yeah, there's always something. And I think that as we use the terms, big T trauma and little T trauma, like, yeah, those are very like what's the for like hot topic like terms.
Mhm.
But it is true. Like, you can have a really big T trauma event that shapes the way that you move forward in life, but you can also experience like little things that your brain just, I don't know, adapts to it. It changes the way you think. And then you also go down a path of bad decisions.
Right. Well, and I have a firm belief, and I would love to have any way to be smart enough to investigate this or to research it. But I believe that a lot of the trauma that or a lot of the violence that we see in some of these urban areas are because people are growing up in the trauma of regular, being exposed to regular homicide. I go
Yeah.
to an inner city church, and there almost every family in our church has been affected by homicide or something like that. And it makes me believe that, I mean, I think there's evidence to say that there's a cycle there.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it's like that's why you just be as kind as you can to everyone you can, because you sure hope that maybe that changes something for them that day.
Yeah, there is such a truth in generational curses, and I think that a lot of these families that experience the alcoholism or the anger issues and stuff that result in the criminal acts that happen, that stuff gets carried down through generation, and it takes someone breaking the cycle in order for things to get better. And that's really hard to do when, one, you have to identify that that's what's happening. And two, you have to kind of decide that you're going to go it alone because most of the time your whole family is going to be against you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have a question from Jordan. If you watch or listen, you know
Yeah.
Jordan's our favorite. And it says, empathy can be mistaken for bias by people who've never had to stand close enough to understand someone's burdens. Have you learned to honor the humanity of first responders without losing the objectivity that good journalism demands? Jordan, thank you for that question, because that's very insightful. And it's very true that, yeah, it's hard to so obviously I was a first responder. I was a journalist before that. And then one day some firefighters thought it'd be really cool to put me in some turnout gear and send me in a smoked up house and watch me try and rescue a dummy for training, and it stuck. And after that, it's just kind of one thing after another. And Travis Howes said something when I interviewed him, and he said, I asked for everything I got, talking about the trauma. That he wanted to stand on the edge. He wanted to see life. He wanted to, be there in people's worst moments and help them in that time. And that's how I felt. And then because of that first responder role, I also got to be there at the crime scenes. I got to be there at the homicides and the shootings and stuff because I showed up as a first responder, as a medical, medical first responder. So that said, some of it was inherent. Some of it was I understood it because I was there. But the other thing is, too, I think what we don't do enough in society and what you learn to do as a journalist is put yourself in everybody's mind. So when I say something like that suspect's family didn't ask for that, that's because I have to put myself in their mind. And then I was having a conversation with another journalist the other day. We were talking about law enforcement shootings. And she was asking, just different questions about it. And I was saying, okay, imagine this, and I told her about a shoot or don't shoot simulator that I had done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one where I was supposed to be the officer. And for those of you that don't know about this, it's like it gives you a scenario and you are interacting with it. So you're looking at a screen, but you're talking to those people like you're there. So I'm the officer. And I walk in and I see this woman and she's standing there crying and my husband beat me and he's somewhere here and he's got a wine bottle and whatever it was. So I'm standing there talking to her. Where is he? Where did he go? What happened? That kind of thing. And then I see something over here and he comes into the screen with this wine bottle holding it like a weapon. And I turn and he comes at me. And as I'm going to shoot him, she shoots me. And when you watch the replay, yeah, I know, how could she, right? But as you watch the replay, she reaches into, when she sees the gun, she reaches into the sink and pulls a gun out and shoots me.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about domestic violence being the most dangerous for officers. And so I explained that to this other journalist. I told her about a couple other scenarios that I had done. And I said, the problem is what we are told by the release from MBI is, suspect brandished a weapon, officer pulled the trigger, period.
Yeah.
And that never captures the whole picture. So sometimes just as you said, Jordan, standing close enough means that you can't see it just as one thing anymore. It becomes a whole picture. And to be real honest, I want everyone to know the whole picture. I've been losing my mind over a couple of the cases that are out there right now that I know stuff about, and I can't tell. And you know how this is, Amanda, when there's a case and you know that there are things that if people knew, it would be different. The public reaction would be different. Only you can't tell because it's not out there yet.
Yeah, I actually at a place that I worked, I was involved in an internal affairs investigation, and I had to give my side of the story. I was not the subject of the investigation, but I was a witness, or I don't know what you would call it. And there were a lot of things being said about me and another officer that we weren't allowed to defend ourselves, nothing, because we were under a gag order. And I was like, if they, like, that's not what happened. That's not the truth. Like, and it was very humbling and eye-opening that, like, perspective, or I'm sorry, not perspective, perception
Yeah.
is reality. in the eyes of the world.
Right.
It may not be the truth, but it is reality. And we don't get to choose people's perception.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
And now you're beating my drum that I have been blowing up people's phones about for the last 3 weeks. And I'm not going to go down that road because we'll be here all day.
We'll talk
But
about it off air.
we will talk about it on another podcast.
Oh.
And we're going to, maybe one day something will happen where we can talk about that, what you were talking about on the podcast as well. So we have another question from Carrie Davis.
Oh,
Hi,
I love
Carrie.
these questions.
What positive stories have you seen where someone has broken the cycle, and how have they done it?
Sometimes when you are just inundated with so much negativity, it's really hard to notice all of the positives. But being on this podcast has allowed me to interact specifically with a lot of JPD officers who, most of which talk about how they experienced some kind of something, some kind of childhood abuse, whatever, from family members, their community, and yet they chose to be the person that breaks the cycle, and then they committed their lives to working in the community that kind of played a role in hurting them.
Yeah.
And they break that cycle by becoming an officer and committing to helping the people in that community. I think that's really the only thing I can think of right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so I was looking at the next question from Peyton. We know the bad stories get the most attention, but what's the best story or news that you got to report on? And it's like, I can think of, I know I've done a ton. Unfortunately, the way our brains work, what we remember is the bad stuff. So you get 15 positive comments, you're going to remember the one bad one. So I remember a lot of really sad ones, but I want to say the one we were going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Y'all, when we get these guests back on, you've got to watch, because we had Barbara McNeil on a couple of weeks ago. Barbara Folsom McNeil. She's a captain at JPD. When she was young, she was in an abusive situation, and a police officer came in and got her out of that situation. All she remembered about him was that he was white. She thought he might be tall, but she was young. So, of course, he was coming in to save her. Of course, he was tall. I cried talking about it. Y'all, what a good story. And so she got on our podcast and was just like, she just told me, I know if anybody can find him, you can. And I was like, that's a tall order. And so we talked about him. And you and I were both kind of like, gosh, I hope we find him.
Yeah.
And it was literally about 24 hours when my friend Jasper Welsh called and told me who that officer was. And so tonight's episode was going to be her getting to meet with his family. And when I called her to make sure she was coming, she's just gravely sick. One of those chest cold, I say grave, that's the wrong word, but chest cold type, wasn't even sure what day it was. So we will be bringing them back on. And to me, that's one of the best stories, because we found him. He's no longer with us, but his family, they'll get to really sit down and talk about who he was and the legacy that he left for his son, who also became a police officer.
Yeah.
So that's a great story also. Let's see, we've got another one. Walk us through what happens from the moment someone suggests a case until listeners hear the finished episode. How do you decide whether a case is the right fit? What kind of research goes into it? How do you prepare for interviews? And have there ever been times when you completely change direction after learning new information? Okay, that's a really good question. And I'm going to say some of them are not complicated at all. It's just, oh, yeah, that's a good story. Come on and tell it.
Yeah.
Some of them, it's not that simple. Because like when we didn't have to. I always use the phrase had to, and people are like, did you have to though? When we told the story about the ongoing Quentin Tellis trial, and we had you and Lance, the attorney, in here.
Yeah.
That was one that we had to be careful with, because that still has no resolution.
Yeah.
There's still no verdict in that case. So it was like, because it was going on for me, and because that suspect, that defendant, Quentin Tellis, is about 11 years of my life. He is also the suspect in the Jessica Chambers case, which also has not been resolved. A lot of people think that he was acquitted, but he actually had 2 hung juries. So it's still out there. They can still
Mhm.
try it. And as in the situation that I'm in right now with some projects I've got going on, I know a lot about that case that we can't talk about yet because of that very thing.
Mhm.
So the decision to talk about that case, that took a lot of thinking because I felt like it was important. I felt like it needed to be talked about. I kind of even said, because when I set the date to talk about that case, I thought it was going to be over that day.
Yeah.
It was not.
Mhm.
And we just didn't know what to do if we didn't do it, so we did it. So it depends, and sometimes it's about who can we get. There's a lot of cases that you guys send to us, um, and we can't get anybody to talk about them yet,
Yeah.
or at all.
Yeah. A lot of police mainly. Um, Whenever we are kind of trained in the academy and we get hired on an agency and whatever, we're told do not talk to the media. Under no circumstances make a statement. And although a podcast is not media, because there is a camera and a microphone, people kind of shy away from it,
Yeah.
and they don't want to say the wrong thing. So in that, there's a little bit of hesitancy. Um, eh, I don't know. It's people are just funny about talking about their cases.
Well, and I'll give why I think why in just a minute. But
Okay.
first, let's hear back from ADSI and Southern Connection.
I am currently owner CEO of ADSI. I've got a whole bunch of guys that are a whole lot smarter than I am, and what they do is they develop software for police departments and dispatchers, and that's what we do. And our why is Deputy William Durr, and William Durr gave his life to protect others. And so what we try to do is make sure that if I can provide some level of officer safety, that's all that matters to us.
While on the force, I learned that an officer is only as good as his team and the gear that he carries. Ultimately, that is what helped me make the decision to supply and support the demands that the officers need.
From uniforms to upfitting service vehicles, our family strives to connect people with the resources they need. From enforcing the law, fighting fires, or simply protecting the ones they love. At the Southern Connection Police Supplies, our family is here for yours. Stop by and see for yourself.
Okay, so what I was saying before the commercial was that I think it is very much about being on camera in some of these cases. I think also, and it's kind of something that, as someone who teaches media classes to first responders, I think also there is just a mindset that says we don't talk about it. You go
Yeah.
to court, you're
Yeah.
trained to talk in court,
Mm-hmm.
and then you might talk about it sitting around a bonfire with a beer.
Yeah.
But something like this, for some people, is just a little hard, a little bit of a hard stretch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially
for sure.
cops.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because it is ingrained in us. Not only like we don't talk about the trauma, but we don't talk about the cases on camera
Or at all.
at all, ever.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's kind of interesting is just how that dynamic works. Peyton is asking if we've ever done a deep dive on Curtis Flowers. We have not. And that is honestly just because as we've gone through cases, sometimes, I mean, that's a big one. I just have not run across anybody that did it, but that doesn't mean I can't make a couple calls.
Yeah. I'll be perfectly honest. I have no idea who that is. But this is not the first time that Therese has heard me say, like, I have no idea. People ask me all the time, oh, did you hear about the thing that happened in, and I'm like, did it happen in Clinton? Was it a felony? Did it get assigned to me? Then no. Like, because I have my own cases.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of mental capacity outside of working my cases. There's a lot that goes into having to think about all of the twists and turns and the paperwork. No one prepares you.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, drive fast, get a gun, shoot things.
Yeah.
No, it's like 90% paperwork,
Right.
especially as an investigator. So I often have never heard of the cases that we talk about. You send me the information, and sometimes I get a chance to look at it, and then sometimes I don't, and I'm like, well, it's going to be a surprise what we're talking about today.
And, you know, I think that's why with you and Sarah both being law enforcement, I know that I can bring you in and sit you down, and you know how to ask questions about something maybe you don't know about.
Yeah.
So that's always helpful. I think, too, when it comes to something like Curtis Flowers, so there are some major cases. It's not one of them, but there are some major cases that everybody's talked into the ground that I'm not going to deal with. And it's because everybody's talked it into the ground. And once you've got enough opinions out there, one thing people don't like is anymore is for you to change their mind. So when you say something that challenges the narrative that they have in their head, it makes them angry. And I live a life where my whole entire life is out on social media. You know, I mean, not my personal life, but like on a daily basis, I've got somebody saying some kind of nonsense, right? And sometimes I don't feel like having that fight. The Andreacchio case or Andrecchio case or however you pronounce it from Meridian, you're not going to see that here. You guys fight about it too much. I am not going to get involved with that. And that even that will make people mad.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's a couple of cases that that come up regularly that it's like there's one that is not resolved yet. And I've asked a couple of people to come on about it, but then it's like I'm not going to attack it without somebody there. And even then, I already know that it's going to be drama. So for me, this is fun for me. I want it to stay fun, you know, so that's kind of why we don't touch on some of these. Curtis Flowers is not one, and it was a controversial case, and maybe we will get somebody on about it.
And then I'll learn about it.
Right.
It'll be great.
And then you'll know. Yeah. So I got AI to pull our list of episodes, like I told you, and I did our top 10 episodes, and then I did our top 10 Amanda episodes. So I'm going to go ahead and read y'all our top 10 episodes so that if you're new to the podcast, and I ran into somebody the other day that was on episode 3, and she was already hooked, and I was like, you know what, that makes us feel good to know that you're listening. So this is just based on per day downloads. So the Curse of the Jessica Chambers case, that was when we had Ron Maxey on to talk about Jessica Chambers, and that was shortly after Paul Rowlett died. So that was at the end of 2025. No death date on her tombstone. That was the first one we did on Chandra May. We brought in Sheriff Mike Lee because I had heard that we might be about to solve that case. And so he came in and told the story, and they had not solved it, and he did not tell us they were going to. But number 3 is after they solved it. Yeah. So that one was called, that's number 21, Cold Case Cracked. The 4th was number 1, Behind the Headlines, The Calculated Crime of Carly Gregg, our very first ever. Of course, people are fascinated with Carly Gregg because she's a 14-year-old who shot her mother. And what? The Walter Simpson case. Now, that's one not a lot of people knew, or, I mean, it's been on some of the little, like, you know, IDTV things, but that was when we brought in Rankin County DA Bubba Bramlett or Madison County. It was the Madison County case. Madison-Rankin County DA Bubba Bramlett and Scott Regilio, an ADA, about Philonda Job Simpson and her daughter Devonda Washington, who were murdered by her husband, Walter Simpson. So that was a big one. Another Mike Lee episode from Scott County, The Murder of Dee Edie, was number 6. That was episode number 43, if you're looking for it. She was found dead in her forest home. Sammy Patrick went on the run. That was a big manhunt.
I remember that
You remember that one? Yeah. Myra Lewis, Into Thin Air, episode number 13. We had Randy Tucker on, the sheriff in Madison County. That was a big one because for the first time ever, he said that he believes the family's involved.
Yeah.
And after many years, that was...
Didn't he say, like, this is... I'm saying this for the first time, open? Yeah. That was kind of cool.
It was really cool because it was something that I think a lot of people had expected through the years.
Yeah.
And a lot of prognostication was out there. This is who's going to be... But obviously, we've never found her. But he said that and hoped that it would bring some people out. And we did. We all got some phone calls.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from a lady that ended up telling the story to one of the TV stations instead of me.
Okay.
And that's okay.
That's her choice.
Right. So let's see. We also had Hate, a Bathtub, and a Stubborn Coroner. And that was the story of Gail Mosby, who was a 39-year-old nurse that was found dead in her Jackson bathtub. And they first said it was a suicide.
That
was a Charlie Smith episode.
Case.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can always tell the Charlie ones because they.
Yeah.
That was episode number 34. The disappearance of Gregory Varnado. That's Lawrence County. Sheriff Ryan Everett came here. He vanished in 2024, and he was found in his burned up vehicle. And because Lawrence County is very close knit, there were a lot of questions about that one. And number 10 was our interdiction episode. And you and I laughed about that because we put John Johnson and Centel Easterling in the same chair.
Yep.
And they were wearing their whole kit.
Yeah.
You know. And what did you say?
I said we must be pretty intimidating that they gotta be suited up. Sitting here in the studio on the podcast.
But it really looked good on camera.
Is that why we put them in the same chair?
Oh, yeah.
That Daniel says it was. Daniel is our technical guy, and he thought that would look good.
Yeah. Okay. It was a vibe.
Yeah,
For sure.
And you and I had our own chairs. Usually we're the ones that.
That's
share the
right.
chair.
That's why I was wondering, like, why did we put them together?
Right. That's not the only time we've done that. We put Anthony Fox and Desmond Barney in the chair together as well.
but that makes much more sense.
Yeah. Let's see. So we've got Jennifer Lay, of course, says she knows her favorite one because we had her husband on here, John Michael. Scarlett Campbell says the murder of Will Polk. That's one out of the Delta that was a big deal. Will Polk and April Jones went missing. And then it was a long investigation in which it was kind of suspected. The police said, well, I bet they ran off together and got married. You know, sometimes you have those episodes or those cases where the immediate theory is in no way correct. And this was one of them. So that would be a good one also.
Imagine that.
Right.
People jumping to conclusions. That never happens,
No,
right?
Right. No. Especially no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the rest of that thought. So, okay, and then the top 10 Amanda ones, we mentioned the Firehouse Massacre, Malice in Monroe, that was the one about the Tellis trial that we were just talking about. The human trafficking one with AG Lynn Fitch and Task Force Supervisor Fabian Jones.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that one, and it was cool. I'm on the ICAC task force and the Secret Service task force or whatever. So I'm literally at the AG's office like a couple times a month. Like I have my own badge with my picture on it, you know. So it was kind of cool to have her like in our realm.
Right.
Like welcome.
It was cool like that for
realm.
me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one was Light in the Dark. That was Clint Hatch talking about first responders and faith.
Oh, yes. That's probably my favorite.
Yeah, that was a good
That one and his second episode.
So the funny thing about doing this is we talk about death and destruction so often that when Clint wrote this book, for those of you that aren't aware of what we're talking about, he wrote a book basically just talking about faith for first responders. And at some point I was like, yes, absolutely, we need to have that.
Yeah.
We talk about mental health. We talk about legislation. We talk about all these things. Why not talk about how faith can get you there, you know? The next one was Monsters Online. Again, that was in your wheelhouse. That was Jay Houston talking about internet crimes against children.
Yeah. I really enjoy talking. Well, obviously, I enjoy talking about stuff I know about, but it is such a passion. So I enjoy being in the room with other people who understand. It is. I don't get the opportunity to be around a lot of people who have worked those types of cases or understand. There's a strange sense of humor that comes along with it that is even different than regular cop humor.
Yeah.
And usually I can find like my one person at an agency. But when I'm working one of those cases or talking about interviewing a suspect or something, they all kind of, they scatter. And I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning that pretty much you, me, Sarah, all of us are very good at being in a group of normal, just polite, normal people. And we can take the mood from up here to down here super fast just by telling a story that we think is normal.
I know. It's, Yeah, it's a talent. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. So the next one, we've talked about the Walter Simpson case, then the murder of Dee Edie, and then guarding the interstates. That's the interdiction one. And the other one that was one of yours is from Mississippi to Mexico, tracking Miguel Oros. And that was MBI Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Herzog talking about the serial rapist that he tracked to Mexico.
Yeah. That was really, really kind of fascinating. And that the fact that they would go as far as to track someone to Mexico. I've got a case right now, like not an interesting case by any means, but like the possible suspect lives in like Connecticut, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that.
Maybe he'll come back through one day.
I can't even imagine tracking someone to Mexico.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things that was so interesting about that one to me was that those are the stories that we don't hear. Those are the stories that we never know happened unless someone like Jimmy comes and tells those stories.
Yeah.
And we actually have him coming on next week to tell another one of his stories. So he's currently the lieutenant colonel over MBI. Another one, now this isn't on the list yet because these are the ones that have been out for more than 60 days. You can't really get a good read on the ones that are under 60 days. But Gary Stanton's episode for Darius Wilson actually did really well also. So that said, we've had some good ones, and I feel like what we're doing here is important not only because it kind of personifies you guys, it humanizes the investigators. And that's not just important because of the media narrative that sometimes y'all might not be nice people, but it's also important because people are looking at you expecting you to be Olivia Benson.
Yeah.
And you know what? you are.
I am.
You are
Thank
so
you.
Olivia Benson. But on the other hand, like she's bulletproof, she just, all of her problems are solved in 30 minutes.
Right.
Like because the first 30 minutes is about the crime. And then it's
Exactly.
Olivia being fabulous. And it's not that you're not fabulous, but that's not real life.
No, not at all. Not at all. Most of the time, y'all are lucky if I brush my hair because just the mental exhaustion that you experience, specifically as an investigator. I think that investigations is one of those things where maybe you should consider, or maybe a department should consider, like rotating at some point in time or offering some type of a mental health something, because it consumes you even if you have a good work-life balance, because all of that information kind of always exists in your brain.
Yeah.
Like there is no like getting it out. But I would like to say that, we constantly joke about the fact that we kind of catfish people with the name of the show being Investigation Homicide. But here in like the last year, we've started, having other people, other things involving first responders. And like half of the episodes you just listed, for at least for the Amanda episodes, like 3 of them were special victims, child crimes. One of them was the Faith one. I mean,
ooh, I missed one.
Oh.
I just realized when I was looking at it, I did miss one. And it was the one that people thought about the most.
Oh.
Can you guess?
No, I don't know that
It
we
was
had one.
Unjustifiable Homicide, the Jack Donald Cole case.
Oh,
The one about how you can't just shoot
yes.
somebody.
Yes. People were devastated
Yeah.
because they learned, well, they were told, I don't know if they actually received it, you can't just shoot somebody because they're on your
Right.
property.
Right.
There are rules.
And that, I mean, even the clips, we have those little clips that go on the Facebook page. Those went nuts in many
Yeah.
cases. I had a guy that was still commenting on it like months after it, just going back and re-commenting again. So that said, but yeah, no, you're right. I'm looking at it here. So we had human trafficking, we had faith and first responders, we had ICAC, and we had interdiction. All of those were not about homicide.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I realized as we were doing this is it's what we were talking about. It's hard to get somebody every week to talk about a homicide.
Yeah.
You kind of have enough people, and then, I mean, we can get people to travel or we can Zoom or whatever, but also when you're trying to schedule them out, it can be a challenge, but also there have been things that were worth talking about. I mean, these things that we're talking about, but also when we got into the legislation around Tier 5, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I realized that, like, yes, the name is investigation homicide. That is going to be the primary thing that we talk about here. But if we're trying to talk about what you guys go through, because mental health is a huge part of this, well, then there's other things too. Because are you going to tell me that work in ICAC doesn't affect your mental health?
Yeah.
Are you going to tell me that some of those things don't lead to homicide? You know, this world is all very closely knit.
Yeah.
So another thing, though, that you mentioned the mental health aspect, and I mentioned that I've kind of been fighting some battles this week with some of the cases that are out there and some of the things that aren't being said, some of the stories that aren't being told. Then you have, the big guilty pleas going on with the Jackson public figures, because they're not elected officials anymore.
Yeah.
You've got those situations, and it's like at some point when you're dealing with things that are life and death, that are major events every day, it does start to wear on you. And the other day there was a story that came through that all I needed to do was write it up and put it online. It was a press release about a homeless man in a wheelchair that was hit by a car. And long story short, I saw it and I was like, I can't do that. I don't have it in me. I can't do it today. So do you have days like that?
All the time. Literally all the time. I something in my day I'll come up against like a wall, some type of friction where like I have to do a simple task, but it relies on someone else to do a task. And when they don't do their task, then I can't do my task. And I'm like, my whole day is done. And it's just because like it's so hard and so tiring to constantly have to come up against like battles and hoops that you have to jump through just to do what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It is exhausting.
So, okay, we're getting close to the end.
Okay.
For those of you that are listening or watching, if you think of cases you want to know more about, understand we can't. I mean, if they're not resolved, we may not be able to touch them.
Yeah.
But we may be able to do something. Just let us know what you want to hear. If you have questions, feel free to send them to us at our Investigation Homicide Facebook page. You can comment on our stuff. Also, let us know. And just if you want to send it in a message or put it in a comment, let us know if you would be interested in behind the scenes stuff. Whether we make videos about, stuff that happens after the podcast, or whether we tell you little details we forgot to, include, or whether we get updates. Would you be interested in something like a Patreon or like a subscription where you could learn more? Let us know about that. Amanda, do you have closing thoughts?
I still think maybe right before I came on to the show, I threw out the idea of a ghost episode. And I really feel like at some point we need to do that, where we have people who may not want to visually appear or be mentioned by name, but they get to talk about a thing that is taboo to talk about and like really lay it out there and spill the tea on some things we experience.
So on TV, what we would do is we would film their shoes and then we would warp their voice. Daniel, can we warp voices? He says we can do anything we want.
We can do anything. That's what I'm talking about.
So would you...
I don't know for a fact.
Okay, he says he's not
committed.
sure, but we can find a way. So what if we could do ghost episodes for a Patreon account or a subscription? Would you guys...
call in?
Huh?
They could call in.
Or they could call in. So we're going to work on that. If you would be interested in that, we would do that as a subscription or something like that for you guys. My closing thoughts, Amanda, I wasn't sure that we could just power through this like this. I didn't think we wouldn't have anything to talk about, but I didn't know people would still be asking questions.
Yeah.
So I'm excited
awesome.
about that.
Yeah.
I feel like we should do this more often, like when it's all three of us,
Yeah.
So again, Jimmy Herzog, Lieutenant Colonel over MBI, is here next week. Barbara Folsom McNeil, the captain from JPD, she and the family of Officer Mike Dill, who rescued her from an abusive situation as a child. They'll be here in the future where we're looking for another date to reschedule. And we sure appreciate you guys joining us tonight. If you go to Southern Connection or if you work with ADSI, let them know how much you enjoy the podcast and thank them for making it possible. We appreciate you guys, and we will see you next week.